This is Genuine Connections, featuring collaborative conversations about community, content, creativity, commerce, and the convergence of media and marketing.
Welcome to the 5th episode of Genuine Connections, where we've been exploring the human side and the technology side of marketing with some of the most brilliant minds in our space. And today's guest is someone who truly lives at the intersection of precision and passion, engineering a more human future for marketing at one of the world's most iconic tech companies. Jennifer Kattula is the GM and CMO of Microsoft Advertising. It's a dual role that requires both strategic muscle and empathetic leadership. She's been a builder in every sense of the word, shaping brands and platforms and teams and the industry itself, really, with a rare combination of left brain engineering logic and right brain creative intuition. She's also my friend. Her journey from studying engineering at the University of Michigan, go Blue, to pushing the boundaries of Web3 and now leading global advertising at Microsoft. It's not just impressive, it's instructive. She's returned to Microsoft after a boomerang after several years with renewed perspective. She's driving momentum and reimagining what marketing means in a platform world. And in the conversation that we're about to jump into, we're going to ground ourselves in Jennifer's story, unpack the lessons she's learned navigating big tech, and hopefully explore how she applies the engineering principles that she's built her career on, as well as brand storytelling, team building, and community design. So let's get into it with the brilliant, grounded, and genuinely inspiring Jennifer Kattula. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to Genuine Connections. I'll say I'm honored that you've made some time for us because, yes, we've known each other for many, many years, but you're a big deal. So I am most appreciative that you took some time to talk with us, and I'm excited to actually dig into some things that maybe you and I have not talked about. Does that sound?
Looking forward to it. I'm so happy to be here too.
All right. Well, I'm excited. I want to get in. I know your background, but I want to bring our guest/listeners together in a way, because you've lived many lives across big tech, marketing innovation, Web3, all these things come together. So when you now look back at your journey from where you were to where you are, from engineering at Michigan, go Blue, to now, a big title at a big company, are there things that have remained consistent and constant? Are there things that have built over time as your narrative has progressed?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting question because now I have like 2+ decades to look back on to see what kind of trends there are. And I think learning for me has always been my constant driver. I am super motivated by learning new technology, learning how to do things. I really consider myself a practitioner. And I was an engineer. I was actually a chemical engineer, which I never did. I was very good at coding. I probably should have been a computer science engineer, but my first few jobs were coding. And it came really naturally to me. I think my brain kind of works in that logical way. But there's something very empowering when you can code because you can build things on your own. And, I did a brief stint at American Express, kind of cut my teeth in marketing. But then I came to Microsoft the first time and learned all about digital marketing. I went to Meta. I was there for about 12 years and just saw this high growth and like very Silicon Valley vibe where, everything you do is kind of like 10xing the last thing that you did. And then I spent a couple years in Web3. We both did. And now I'm back at Microsoft. And I think for me, learning has always been the motivator throughout it. I would say when I stop learning or my learning slows down, I will invent new things to do. I do this all the time. Like I have ideas coming out of my ears.
Well,
or I will find a new job.
Well, but you're a builder, right? Like everywhere you've been, it's been either directly or maybe a contributor to something that is being built. I love that this is a way that you describe yourself, right? Um, but it's also about understanding who your customer is, right? That's part of marketing. It's part of building this community. Where does that mindset come from? Was that something that you have always been attuned to, or are those skills or receptors that you've had to open up as you've grown in your career?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it that way. But I think one of my superpowers has always been taking things that are pretty complicated and simplifying them and connecting them to human values, really kind of getting into like what motivates people. And so earlier in my career, I think, I completely bought into and followed the rules of marketing, like the 4 Ps, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then all of the rules of advertising, reach and frequency, et cetera. And what I've realized over, probably the last 10 years or so, maybe 12, is that there's so much information out there. I mean, we're all consuming it all day long. So, what is going to connect to that person that's going to get them to stop in their feed or, actually start to engage? And I think there's a huge responsibility put on marketers to not talk about yourself. And I do think that one of the skills that I had to learn in technology marketing is like what's in it for the customer. I think technology marketing is notorious for sharing the features and benefits of the products, why they're so great. And uh, and most people, even business to business buyers, they are people too. So I think, Microsoft Advertising is a challenger brand, and I think we also have to work a lot harder to stand out. And so, really putting myself in the customer's shoes and um, empathy. I think empathy is a marketing superpower, um, and that's what I kind of hold true. Like, would I stop my scroll to look at whatever this is?
And you mentioned this, so you're a Microsoft boomerang, right?
Hmm.
You were there, you've done many other things, and now you've come back. But the landscape is obviously very different now than it was during that first stint. So, what pulled you back? How has your perspective evolved? What are you doing differently or the same this time?
I'm so the interesting thing is that Microsoft's a huge company. I am actually in roughly the same division that I was the last time. So I came back. The company feels totally different from when I left in 2010. I think Satya has really created just a wonderful culture of within, like, I think there's 200,000 plus people that work in Microsoft now. And so the culture has really transformed. I think now the interesting thing for me about coming back to Microsoft was a couple of things. One, I love advertising. I love communication. I love the technology. Two, Microsoft is leading in artificial intelligence, and I'm so into it right now. I think it's one of the most empowering tools that exists. I think it's going to change how all of us work. And I feel like it allows me to go back to my builder roots where I can get my hands on keyboard and create things. Um, and part of that is my own personality and who I am. Like, I like to do that, but also the empowerment that you have for marketers on my team, for our customers. It's really exciting, and I pinch myself every day,
Well, we can
honestly, that
feel
I
the
get to
excitement.
work on
Yeah,
this. I get
yeah.
to work on it exactly. And honestly, if I had like more time, 28 hours in the day, I would probably be making marketing agents.
Well, what Microsoft Advertising isn't it's not just a product, right? It's a platform. It powers
Hmm.
ecosystems. But you're wearing, I think, based on what you're saying, two different hats, right? As GM and CMO, and you tell me what that exactly means.
Hmm.
But you're balancing, I think, leading a business, but also shaping a brand. And sometimes
Hmm.
those things go together, and sometimes there's a tension or a dynamic with some of that, right? How do you balance that in your in your day to day, week to week, month to month?
Yes, it's so interesting because when I started, I came into the team and I sort of shared my vision with the leadership in Microsoft Advertising and with my team. And one of my core beliefs in marketing is that marketing should be a demonstrable growth driver to the business. So I hold that very true. And in order to say that statement, you have to measure. You have to have the systems in place and goals in place that you're going to drive business growth. And business growth is increases in revenue. It is more customers. It is happier customers that stay on the platform longer. So I think, creating that environment where, we are really pushing towards growth in service of our customers. Like we have to deliver really great products. And then on the other side of that is our brand. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. On the
You're a
other
great storyteller, so I'm just enthralled.
And then on the other side of that is the brand. And I think in advertising, like there's so many options out there. Obviously, there's the big behemoths like Google and Meta. Microsoft, we had to really kind of take a look at Microsoft Advertising. We had to take a look at what are the assets that we have. And the thing that we're really proud of and where our company strategy is going is Copilot and generative AI. It is literally built into every single thing that we're doing. So when we think about where Microsoft can play, Microsoft Advertising can play, we're building AI into literally everything. And we believe that the future is conversational. We believe it's personalized. We believe it's agentic. Um, so so that's like the emotional brand piece of what are you and how are you different and unique from other competitors out there. But like speaking those two languages is you do have to balance it. When I'm talking to the finance team, I talk about numbers.
Yeah. It's right. You have to know your audience and you have to know what the broader outcomes need to be, right? In terms of what you're driving. So,
Yeah.
okay, I want to come back to AI in a second because clearly
Okay.
that is where all worlds are colliding. But you've got that background that I think is uniquely equipped in blending left brain and right brain thinking, right? As well as
Mm-hmm.
anyone I've
Yep.
met in this industry. So that engineering background has shaped the way you lead marketing, which is kind of fascinating to me as a non-engineer. But how do you apply engineering principles just generally? Like, are you thinking iteration, simplification, systems to build real campaigns? Like, does that actually translate?
Yeah, I think it probably, I would love to ask my team this question actually. Where does the engineering brain show up? It comes up in experimentation. So, not like do not set it and forget it. Like I love that saying because it rolls off the tongue, but
Yeah.
experimentation is really important and a culture of always learning. I started to do MBUs with my team probably a little over a year ago. And the whole point of the MBU is to learn what insights are we getting from the campaigns that we're running, all the way down to like what content in a blog post is performing. And we talk about it. So I think that the idea of insights and learning is important. Like what's resonating with our customers? How are we experimenting? How are we moving faster? And then there's another sense of the engineer brain and me, which is just workflow and streamlining workflows.
Mm.
So I know you wanted to go to AI in a second, but one
No,
thing that
you could lead us there. You can lead us
one
there.
thing that
That's
we're
okay.
doing, because like obviously we have access to a ton of AI tools, but how do you think like every leader is saying, how do I actually apply this to my business, right?
Right.
You could have an explosion of AI usage that is disconnected. So we're taking a little bit of a structured approach where we're looking at our kind of our workflows. Where do we feel that, and where do we think AI can streamline, automate, have a big impact, either for productivity or for quality? And we're having a hackathon. And so we're getting some folks in a room together to actually build. And this is what I love about AI is that it's empowering for a marketer who may have used to have to ask a developer to help them do something or an analyst to help them analyze data. Now we have the tools at our fingertips. And I think, there's two parts to this. One is learning how to use it. And then the second is coming out with proof of concepts that potentially we can turn into products for our team.
So, I mean, you've said that the best communication, right, is human. It's simple. It evokes emotion. So in this era of AI generated everything, how do we protect the human in marketing, in business, in society? That's a big question, I know. So let's start with in marketing. Let's start with marketing.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because my LinkedIn feed is currently full of plastic wrapped Barbie dolls. And it's cool, like, to see what AI can do. But then on the other hand, I think, like, we're losing some originality. So I think where marketing comes in is AI can do many things. Like, it can help you concept, it can help you think, it can allow you to get research out there faster. You can create synthetic focus groups so that you can understand your customers and maybe you can message test. But at the end of the day, I don't think AI is replacing originality. I don't think it's replacing taste. I don't think it's replacing uniqueness. And so I think that is going to be the moat between what AI produces and what, like, if you think that AI is going to do all your creative, it's all going to start looking the same. So there's a big element there that I think marketing teams need to think about. The other thing that's really been on my mind is IP infringement. And the other thing I keep seeing in my feed is the Studio Ghibli reproductions. And I think about these artists and the people who have honed their craft for decades and years or their lifetime. And you can recreate that in like an instant. So I think we have a responsibility to have a point of view and take this art and the craft of marketing very seriously, and be very responsible about it. And, I think there's lots of points of view on how to do that, but do it with intentionality.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this comes back to knowing what you're creating for, starting with your purpose, and you can adapt along the way, which I do think AI can help accelerate, but it is not going to. The creativity piece of it, I think, is interesting. But another piece, we are genuine, right? And genuine is about more than just authenticity. It's community building, which I think is one of the hardest yet most valuable challenges in advertising. So what have you learned? I mean, you were at Facebook, which was really one of the first, if not the biggest and most successful ever digital community connecting platforms. Yes, it was a media solution. Yes, it's a data play. I understand where Meta is in the world, but cultivating trust and connection in a platform ecosystem or infrastructure, depending on where it lives, is not easy. So wave the magic wand and tell me how to do it.
I think you're doing a great job of it, Matt, already, because you're putting yourself out there. Like, I see you every single day putting yourself out there on LinkedIn and having a point of view and having a story to share, not to flip the script at all. But I think community building is, honestly, I think Web3 taught me so much about community building, probably more than Meta. Like, Meta's really interesting because you have your social graph and that data is really powerful. I have probably 2,500 friends on Facebook. These are friends and acquaintances and people I've known my whole life. But community building to me is so authentic because you have skin in the game. And that's the Web3 version of community building. Like, you're contributing to the betterment of the community. You're not just a bystander. And I've been I don't have a point of view on this yet, but like, how does that Web3 community building translate into non-Web3 communities where the incentive structures are different? Like, can you create different kinds of incentive structures outside of Web3 where you're not giving away tokens or NFTs or something like that? But there's something to be said there, and it really is. It's authentic. It's genuine. There's a real motivation people have to contribute.
So Web3 is not going away. It's actually had a resurgence, right? And you had this deep stint and deep dive into blockchain as you were exploring the edges of, and really getting into these, as you've said, the fundamentals of community and connection, and also decentralization and value
Mm-hmm.
exchange.
Mm-hmm.
What else from that world now, as you move into and see where AI can help us, and the automation of ads to deliver the right message on the right platform to the right people? That's been the holy grail. But are there things that marketers should be carrying forward or going back to with respect to some of those maybe initial learnings, lessons, mistakes that have become learning experiences?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing on my mind, like if you compare or if you look at Web3 learnings to what's happening with AI, is just speed. So, like, Web3 is very decentralized. You can spin something up very quickly. Um, there's not necessarily a playbook or a rule book. So, there's a lot of scams out there. Now with I don't think it's the same like risks involved, but the risks are you can build this technology, and if you don't understand it, you can damage your brand, you can damage your experience with customers, there's a lot of like negative potential out there because of the scale of the technology and the proliferation of it. So I think those are like really similar things. And I saw it at Meta too. Like, it was up and to the right growth. And you didn't know what impact having 3.5 billion people on the platform was gonna have, like, down the line. So, like, I think the responsibility on business leaders and builders is to think through like negative consequences up front.
Which some are doing, and hopefully we do more of. And I think just as leaders and connectors in the space, it's important that we talk about it. It's important that we think about it. It's important that we do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think given your platform, the company that you work at, that is a massive leader and connector in the space as well, right? Like, I'm glad to hear you talking about that. But for Microsoft Advertising specifically,
Yeah.
then, what are you most excited about right now in this ecosystem? Any signals that you think are being missed by the broader industry, or things that you want to lean into more, maybe that we're just starting to scratch the surface with?
Yeah. Okay. So I truly think that the conversational interface is going to be the future. For example, I have rearranged the home screen on my phone, and my entry point to the internet is Copilot. Now, think about that for a minute. What happens to websites? What happens to shopping? What happens to search? I'm not saying that I don't search. I'm not saying I don't go to a website to like go deep on anything. But what I'm saying is like there's this beautiful simplification of my experience. And even when I'm in, say, a Microsoft 365 application, I can use Copilot to do things that are on the ribbon. There's like 100 things you can do on the ribbon. And now I can use
like
Copilot.
The human brain, right? We only use the human brain to like 5% of its capacity. I feel like that's true with my Microsoft suite of tools.
Yeah.
I don't even know what half these buttons do.
There's a lot of features for sure.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be sort of a reordering of how we interface with technology, and then we'll have different modalities. Obviously, there's voice, and there's vision. One thing I do often is I'll like take voice notes and plop them into Copilot and
Mm.
turn that into like, I don't know, a memo or a blog or whatever I'm thinking
That's a good
about.
tip. Okay, good
Yeah,
tip.
yeah. But
Thank
I
you.
think the meta point that I'm making is that the conversational interface is, I think in a couple of years, like that's how we're going to interface with technology.
Hmm. I'm writing this down just because I want to remember that these tips, these ideas, the
Yeah.
conversational interface.
I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
I, you know, this isn't about me; it's about you. But we're a community here, right? So we can share. Um, I approach this from two directions as well, but it's ultimately understanding that there's this macro narrative that's taking place, which is the ways in which we interact are changing. Who is going to own it, if that's ownable? Who is going to make it easier? Who's going to make it better, like the quality of this? And at the same time, so that's a product, that's a marketing, that's a messaging set of
Mm-hmm.
challenges, and there's different stakeholders within that, right? You and I are in the marketing, but also technology and creative worlds that
Mm-hmm.
converge. Are we talking to marketers? Are we talking to product people? Are we talking to revenue drivers? Yes, yes, and yes, but they also sometimes have different goals and objectives within their organizations. And then there's the end consumer. Let's not forget about her or him. So right now, it's like, where do we start? And I almost want to use AI to tell me where to start, but that could also be wrong. So that's one side of it. The other side, as you talked about, is the creativity, like the right brain of this. I am excited for what can be created and inspired and help input and inspire, but I'm also nervous that it's going to dull our senses.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can help us rise above the noise in this sea of clutter? What can help us um, discern real from fake, fact from fiction? All those things. So,
Yeah.
this is why we are doing what we're doing at Genuine, which is
Mm-hmm.
product, which is marketing. It's why you're doing what you're doing, which is about connecting and ensuring that the right messages get to the right audiences efficiently and successfully. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what excites me. But I know, look, I think this is something we have in common. You and I are people who lead with empathy and hopefully clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So putting a plan in place is great, but you also have to be able to adapt. So
Yeah.
2025 is 1+ quarters old. So I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah.
What should organizations be thinking about? What does the modern marketing structure look like? How does it interface with product? Are they two sides of the same coin? Are they
Mm-hmm.
partners? Are they frenemies? How is this evolving?
The modern marketing organization, that's a big question. So I think there's a bunch of pieces to this. So one is going to be your MarTech and the data that you have, your first party data, who you're reaching, where you're reaching them. Your brand's a big part of it. Your point of view on how you're breaking down your workflows with AI. And I said that before, but AI has a role to play in some of
Mm-hmm.
these things. Um, and when it comes to product, I work with our engineering team all the time because I look at sales, marketing, and product as like three legs of the stool. So when we're building our MarTech stack, we're thinking about how do we have marketing messages in product that help the customer do the next best action, for example? Or how do we take the next best action from product and bring it into our marketing communications? And I think that we have to, as leaders, we have to think about all those levers. And how can I help the product team be more successful and give them insights? How can help sales be more successful, give them insights? Um, so I think it's for me at least, it feels very collaborative
Mm.
because it like we all help each other.
So let me just drill down 1 degree deeper into that,
Yeah.
because your background is somewhat unique in that
Hmm.
engineering marketing convergence that we've talked about, not everyone has that. So tactically or strategically, what advice or what are things that people can do who are marketers today, who are trying to get more technical, right? Like reading up on things is helpful, but only to the point of being able to potentially understand it at the level that they're reading it at, right? So how can people become better communicators when it comes to this?
Yes, yes, it's a really good question. I think the biggest thing is to learn how to speak engineering language. So
I was
engineers,
afraid you'd say
they're,
that. Okay. All right. Well,
yeah,
challenge
you were
accepted.
afraid.
Yeah.
Challenge accept, like um, data driven, experimentation driven. Um, like I always walk into the room with the engineering team with data and like fact. And when I give insights, they are organized in a factual way. Like here's what we're hearing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really powerful is making sure that your engineering team has access to your customers. So, for example, we have forums where we bring customers together, like executives, and we bring our engineers into that. We
Right.
bring our engineers into our events that are sort of closed door, so they can get the vibe of like what other marketers talk about. Because sometimes when I'm the translation layer, it's not as powerful as when they're actually hearing a pain point or an insight from a customer. So I think like it's a little balance of, tug at their heartstrings, but also show them a bunch of data. And I think that's why I love working with engineers. This is why I love working with finance too, because it's like all data. Show me the money.
Yeah. And the outcome is as measurable as anything. It either
Yeah,
worked or it didn't with
yeah,
finance.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a marketer, like sometimes I think about it like, oh, you're just another customer set that I have to understand. You're another audience that I have to understand what is driving and motivating you. The engineering team is usually trying to drive product adoption. How can I make them drive product adoption? Finance is trying to drive revenue. So um, I think marketers can get really good at this actually.
Yeah, and ultimately they end up at the same place, right? There's different outputs that each of those stakeholders or constituents can drive, but they're driving what should be a predefined set of outcomes
Mm-hmm.
that that's the North Star, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we come close to wrapping up here, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the following two questions. One is a technology that you think is maybe overhyped right now.
I think something that is overhyped, and I might be an outlier, is voice in your home. So I'm talking about like an Alexa or something like that. Because to me, I just want people in my house that are going to interact and talk with me. And I don't want to have a technology listening and stay up to date with the privacy policies that go with it. Because that's the other thing. Like I'm probably like most people, I'm not staying up to date with those privacy policies. And I do think my home is private and I want to stay
As
private
you
in my
should.
home.
Or you should at least be able to control it as the default.
Well, right. I think it's potential changes. Like I might miss a privacy policy and all of a
Right.
sudden, like,
Yeah.
it's always on.
So last question. How do you think about, define, and personify connection in your life and in your work today?
I think it's presence. I think it's like it's presence with no distraction. So I think about this a lot with my kids and
Mm.
I dedicate like, the 45 minutes before school. It's a little crazy, but as soon as they're home from school and whatever they're doing from 5 to 8, it is like that is family time that is non-negotiable with like no we're doing something together, no devices. And I notice myself when I am like, looking at my phone when I'm with other people. So if I'm going to commit to be in communication with someone, whether it's a one-on-one or a meeting or whatever, I want to be present because I think that builds connection, and that way I can listen and not just listen to a reply and say what I want to think, but really genuinely listen. And I'm always looking to learn as well, but I think that's how I would define it. Is present.
So genuinely listening and learning is underpinning your connection. Well, I can't think of
Mm-hmm.
a better way to wrap that up as we're talking about genuine connections today.
Genuine.
So
Exactly.
Jennifer, thank you for this. This was really insightful, but also actionable. I mean, I wrote things down. So, and then I'll have to have my co-pilot obviously tell me how to prioritize and actually make it work. But no, your background, your experience, but also what you're building and driving to is really exciting, but also really important. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.